So today I'm going to talk about using Cursor, and I'm going to talk about code generation in general. And what I did, as I realized I've made some notes here and I'd forgot them. Okay, so look, there's a couple of things I want you to take away from this talk, right? At the end of this talk, I want you to realize that code generation has become good enough for data science use. You'll see some of its strengths, and you're going to see some of its weaknesses. Also, this is a bit threatening, and I'm not supposed to threaten audiences, but I will, right? Look, code generation is good enough now. A lot of software engineers are using Cursor, and because they are, you'll see how far you can go using Cursor for data science, which means that software engineers can do more data science. So higher productivity, people from the outside coming in, potentially data science role shrinkage, right? Which is not good news, I know that, but I think I want everybody to be aware of that. And controversially, I know that splitting data scientists from their notebooks is like prizing notebooks in their cold, dead hands, right? They're not going to give up. But I think actually Cursor and things like it are a better path for development than notebooks. And you can disagree with me, and that's fine, but I'm not going to listen to you if you do. So it's okay. All right, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a view of the state of the art of code generation for data science. All right, let's go through a couple of code generation products out there so you know what I'm talking about. This is Claude.ai. I think everybody's seen this kind of stuff. You go to Claude, you go to Perplexity, you go to Copilot, blah, 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 blah. You put a prompt in, it generates some code for you, and that's fine. It's a kind of a cute thing. It's a bit of a toy. If that's all you've used for code generation, you need to up your game, right? This is not enough, right? So it's a kind of minor piece that's a nice show and tell, but nothing very more. Somebody asked about Claude, the Claude command line tools, right, the download stuff. This is where you download the stuff. It interrogates your code base. It learns from your code base. It does a little bit of prompt completion for you, and it will do some prompt-based code development. I know people swear by it, and that's fine. If you like using it, that's okay. I think this kind of stuff is kind of a bit limited, and it's a halfway house, all right? Where the real action is these AI-enabled IDEs. This is one. This is Google's anti-gravity, which has been released about 2 or 3 weeks back. This is a screenshot of my machine with my code, just to get it going and get a feel for it. I'm not going to comment on this. It's very new. I haven't played around with it. But it is supposed to be very good. The thing that I am going to talk about today is Cursor. Right, so in Eric Ma's presentation, you saw Cursor, and I think he gave some tutorial, I think, earlier about Cursor. I'm going to go and explain how it all works, and then I'm going to show you code generation in Cursor. We'll talk about its strengths and weaknesses, right? And we'll also tell you about how much this costs. So now let me do my really stupid thing and actually go off and rely on the Wi-Fi working to go and continue with my presentation. Right, this is Cursor. Okay. Actually, on the bottom, I'm just going to tell you, I wasn't planning on this, but it did happen. See this? Right? So Cursor updates more frequently than any other software that I've used, right? Sometimes it will even give you this update message twice a day. I've seen it happen. So every so often, this thing will pop up, right? And it's various changes. This is like, which is both good and bad. So I'm going to ignore it, but we'll come back to that later. So I'll show you the panels, how this works. For those of you who've used VS Code or something like it, this is all very similar. This is the file explorer. Cursor works largely on a folder basis, and it expects files in the same folder to be related in the same project, right? So that's the explorer. So when you open it, it will ask you what folder you want, and it's a big deal to move between folders, right? Because it loads up a whole bunch of context as well. So if you've got the same kind of files in different folders, it's not a good idea unless they're in subfolders. This is the...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
A big pain, maybe others will agree, how to sort files by date. They're always sorted alphabetically. And sorting by date, it's such a pain.
No idea. So I don't know. There might be an option in there. I don't know. This window here is a debug window. It's the terminal window. It will show you errors. If you do print from your software, it will show up in here. Again, nothing terribly unusual. This is the code development window. If you see that the code, I'll just shrink the other window here a little bit. The code is color-coded. It's, if I could show you a little bit more. It's color-coded. It's the same kind of standard window that you've seen in other editors. This is where it gets really different. This is the AI prompt window. This is something new that you don't see in traditional IDEs, right? So this is where you enter your prompt for what you want. And you can have a prompt to create new code. You can have a prompt that says add new functions. You can have code that edits blocks of code. You can do PEP8 stuff. In fact, I might even show you PEP8 going on later on. You can add comments. You can do all kinds of stuff from this window. And in fact, one of the things I'm going to show you later is a Streamlit app, and I can never remember how to run Streamlit from the command line. So I'm just going to type run, and it will figure it out. Okay? So this is where really the action is. The other place that's very, very different from a typical IDE is here. Right. I've just got to figure it out now. Cursor settings. There we go. Right. And that's rules. OK. So this is a little bit, let me make this a bit bigger on the screen so you can see. Rules, if you've heard anything about Cursor, you may well have heard of Cursor rules. Right? These are the rules by which it goes and generates code. So for example, you can tell it to go and produce, I said I like f-strings over the alternatives, meaningful variable names, keyword arguments. I've got a whole list of these things, right? So what happens is when it generates code for me, it uses this as part of the context. So the idea here is that I've set some high software development standards for the code gen, and it will go off and produce, and in fact, I'll show you the code that it produces in a little while, right? So this is the rules. You'll hear a lot about Cursor rules. They do have a little bit of a kind of Harry Potter, like, I don't know if anybody's read the Harry Potter books, yes? And you know, when they say the spells, and you have to say the spells in a certain way, and you pronounce them just right. Well, you know, basically, rules have a little of the same flavor about them as Harry Potter, right? And the same thing as prompts, by the way. As soon as I heard prompts and I saw what they were, I thought, oh, this is just like, you know, Harry Potter spell, right? You've got to cast the spell in an exactly precise way, right? Anyway, there's loads of these rules. For my money, I think the guys at Cursor did the rules better in the first few versions of Cursor. And actually, as they've gone on, it's got harder to use rules, and they've really kind of messed it up a bit. And this whole thing about agents that we talked about earlier in the previous presentation, that's just muddying the water a lot as well. So I think they've got a little bit of a product feature here as well that they need to sort out. OK, so that's rules. That shows you how it generates stuff. OK, so a couple of things I'm going to tell you about Cursor that's not on a slide here. Right, when you install it, it asks you where your code base lives. So it will go on your hard drive, analyze your code base, look at your code. It will ask you about your GitHub connections, right, or Git connections. It will attempt to go and connect to Git to go and analyze your base. So the reason for doing that is when it generates code for you, it will generate it in the context of your existing code base. Now that's both a good thing and a bad thing. The good,
Sorry, what do you mean by in the context of your existing?
Okay, so let's say that you've already solved a problem, right? That someone in your organization has already solved a particular problem. Maybe they've done a machine learning model or something, right? And the code is in there and it says, this is the way that I will analyze, and maybe I'll use logistic regression to analyze this, right? When you come up with a similar problem, it will look through the code base to see if there's anything similar, and it'll say, I've got a context, I've got a template I can use to go and generate the code, right? Sure. So it's a kind of hint, it's a context learning, if you like, right? So the good thing is if you're a very good programmer, right, and you've done this before and you've got a lot of good code, it will learn good practices. Conversely, if there's a lot of junk in your code base, that's really not such a good thing either. All right, OK, a couple of things. So it will understand your code base, understand Git. It will also connect to Git as well, so you can tell it to check in code, check out code, and do Git operations. Do not do that. Right? I discovered, to my extreme cost, that it is not great at doing that. I had to rebuild a GitHub repository on GitHub because it basically wiped it out. Right? So don't do that. Also, don't ask it to go and restructure your code to make it look nicer. That's just asking for trouble. That's a really bad thing. There's a little bit of a time of day dependency here as well, right? So what that means is at some point when there's, I guess, a lot of demand for code generation, a lot of demand on the LLM times, you get a worse results. And sometimes later on you get better results, right? And it's not great, right? And I know, and that's also a problem as well because this is non-deterministic. As you know, the whole prompt with LLMs is probabilistic, so you couple that in with the time of day dependency. And unfortunately, the time of day dependency is when everybody else is using it, which is likely when you have to get something ready for your boss, and suddenly it's giving you junk, right? So some problems here with doing it. Frequent software updates, well, you can see that, right? That happens, it's sometimes twice a day. Cost. There's a free tier, and you get so many tokens, right? I used the free tier, I exhausted it within like half a day or something, right? So really, if you want to play around with this, you're going to have to pay for it, and it's $20 a month. And what you're looking at is the $20 a month version of Cursor, right? So for a commercial evaluation, $20 a month, right? I mean, how many months of that adds up to one executive lunch, right? Probably not very many. So I'd say that's fine. It's not too bad. Okay, enough of the talking. Let's get onto the code gen stuff, right? So I want to show you how good code gen is, Cursor is at code gen. We're going to start off with some relatively simple problems. I'm going to show you how it can generate some visualization code, meaning some charts. Then I think there was a question from a couple of people about Streamlit. I'm going to show you Streamlit and how good it is at generating Streamlit and how quick it is. I will also tell you quite a shocking story in a good way or a bad way, depending on which way you look at it. I'll then go and look at some statistics. I'll state a problem that if you know statistics and you're good with random variables, the answer's obvious. I will show you how Cursor gets to the answer and how good it is. I'll also show you a variation on that, where the bar is raised, it gets a little bit more difficult, and I'll show you what Cursor does with that. Then I'm going to show you machine learning. I'm going to give it a machine learning problem and show you how far it can go down the path of machine learning, just literally based on maybe a 2-paragraph prompt, right? And I guarantee, well, I hope you'll be surprised. If you're not, I've kind of done something wrong, really, haven't I? Okay, let's go. Let me go and show you this on the right-hand side. So here's my prompt, right? So can you all read it? I can't really make this much bigger. It's a really dumb thing, right? So basically simulating 1,000 coin tosses and working out the mean. That's a dumb problem, right? But the interesting point is I'm asking it to go and visualize that, give me a scatter plot, rather a line chart that shows me the results and say, make it look publication quality. Now, I know Bokeh. I know a lot of people here know Bokeh. Probably take you a couple of minutes to generate something like that. But let me just click on this little button here to submit. Right, so what it does is it's analyzing my request. It's telling me that it's planning its next moves. It's going to analyze what's going on, and provided that there's not a million other people trying to do the same thing at the same time, it will eventually start generating some code for me. Right, okay, there we go. Right, so it's going to start, and it will show me the generated code. Actually, while I'm doing that, I'm going to get something off the screen, get some of the stuff off the screen. Okay. Right. So what it's done is it's found an existing, so I've got an existing simulation here, some existing code. It's looked in the context that I already have, and it's going and creating a file for me based on the existing code that I've got. Right. So here where it's generating away, it's creating a new file for me. What's it called? Coin toss. So let's have a look at the name that it chooses. Oh, coin toss bokeh. There we go. So you see this khaki color? Right, that means that this is all generated code, and it's asking me, do I want to keep it or get rid of it? Right, so in this case, I'm going to keep it. So this is generated code that you've all just seen generated. If I scroll down, I want to point out a few things. Right, look at that. That's Google-style function headers, right? Google-style comments, and it's done that. I didn't tell it to do that. It just did it, right? It did it because it's part of my rules. If I scroll down, if you have a look at the code, you can see there's comments here. It's nicely spaced. If you scroll down a bit further, you can see more Google-style comments. It's all pretty clear, right? So this, I know it's a ridiculously stupid. Let me run it. It's a ridiculously stupid application, right? But it produced some quite decent quality code. Now, I'm going to challenge you as data scientists. If I had a look at your code, would it be as good as that? Oh, there's an embarrassed silence here. That's not a good thing. Okay, so this is the chart that it's produced. Okay, we can argue whether that's publication quality. How much effort did I put into that? I wrote a simple 2-paragraph prompt, right? And that's what I got out. So what I want you to think about is the productivity that you could get by using this kind of tool. Now, okay, that's fine. Why don't I have a look at this? Okay, I've got another example here. What I wanted to do is show a bar chart. And what I've got is some Boston temperature data for the last 120 days. And because I once was a physicist a long time ago, I decided I wanted it in Kelvin, right? Because Kelvin is the most convenient unit to use. So I've converted it into Kelvin. It will just display it, just print it, but I want it to produce a plot, right? So I'm not going to use the command line, the prompts here. What I've got is a comment here, right? You can see what the comment is. It's basically a set of instructions, and if I hit return, okay, look what happened, right? It's just popped up. That's its suggestion for what it thinks I want. So I'll accept that by pressing the tab button. It's given me another suggestion, and I know VBAR is basically Bokeh's bar chart thing, and it prompted me. All of this code, it just figured out what it was going to do, and there it goes. It produced it. Now, I could, of course, have done that myself, right? But why bother? I can just write up the comment and let it figure it out. So it's a productivity saving. If I do run without debugging, and we'll see where it gets to. Right? Actually, it's going away. It's retrieving this data. There we go. So that's it over the last 120 days. Publication quality, well, not really. And look, it hasn't got the date properly, right? So look, there are some things that you have to intervene here, but how much effort did that take? If I asked you to get me this data and produce me this chart, you could do it pretty damn quickly, I'm sure, but not as quickly as that, right? So there's a productivity enhancement. Right, let me go to something. Right. Oh, yes. Let me give you an example. And I'll give you an example. I've spoken to somebody earlier today who had the same problem, right? And I'll tell you an example from 2 years ago. So I was working in a company at a large-scale model. It was a model of insurance risk. And I wanted to put a UI around it, because I wanted to show it to the leadership, right, just show them what I'd been working on. And I looked at Streamlit, and Streamlit was very good, and I kind of figured out how to use it. But then I figured out it would take me maybe a week or so to actually build the UI on this. I didn't really have the time. So I was offered an intern, and I took the guy. Nothing wrong with him, because I need to say that because of what I'm going to say next. Nothing wrong with him, a good little intern. Actually, I shouldn't say little intern either. That's an awful thing to say. But, okay, good intern. He learned Streamlit, and in 3 weeks, he produced me a first-pass UI. That's actually pretty decent. So earlier this year, I thought, you know what? Let's have a look using CodeGen to see what I could get and how long it would take to produce the equivalent work. And in half an hour, I'd replicated what he took 3 weeks to do. Now, okay, some of that is learning, right? And the other point is that for things like the UI framework, it is really, really fast to do. So if you're doing any form of UI work, including Django, which I might talk about if somebody asks, you can generate code really fast, much, much faster than doing it by hand. And as somebody said to me today, right, they said that, look, you know, they had a team, and their data scientists wanted to go and put a UI on their model, right, to show it to the management. They said no, because of the amount of time it would take. Now with this, and I'll show you the Streamlit results that are being produced in a minute, you can do it in maybe half an hour, right? So it's a huge difference. So let me show you. So I've written an application I can show you here. It's an application modeling buses, the maintenance costs of running a bus fleet, right? So in terms of repairing windshields and tires and engine fluids and transmission systems and blah, 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 right? So it's a model that shows the costs over a period of about 1,000 days to get you a sense of how much it might cost to operate a bus fleet, okay? So nothing terribly exciting, except everybody knows what a bus is, right? I know that there are actually buses in America. I've seen them, right? So okay. I will run this. I've actually forgotten. Let me do this. So what I did is I created this model and I said, Streamlit, or rather Cursor, go and create for me a Streamlit interface, right? Give me a UI that enables me to enter the different parameters of the model and show me the different model results. As I said, it took me about half an hour to get this to work because it went down a few dead ends that I had to correct. And I'm going to show you it working, except I can't remember how to run Streamlit applications, right? So it's Streamlit, I think it's Python 3 and then Streamlit, or what? Do you know what? I can't be bothered. Why don't I just type in run here and see what happens? Okay, so now what's happening here is it's figuring out that this is a Streamlit application. It's figured out the code that I need to run it, and it's actually run it for me. And this is the UI that it built for me in half an hour, right? So it's on the left-hand side, you can see there are boxes for the various model inputs. And here on the main part, there are all the charts that the model produces. And what I can do is do things like change the number of buses. So let's make it 52 buses, and you can see the charts update. Right. So this isn't perfect. I would have preferred to have had a multi-tab application. But for half an hour, right? I mean, come on, guys. And if I was basically, you know, if a manager wanted to see this, I could turn this around and show it to them and say, here it is. Right, it's disposable code. Right, and that's the way to look at stuff like this. And of course, Streamlit you can deploy. Okay, doesn't really support a lot of users, but it will support a handful of users. So you could actually deploy this to let other people have a look at it if you wanted. So if you have a Streamlit application that you want to use, this is the kind of thing to do. Okay, so why don't we do something that's a little bit more complicated? I am not going to show you the slide for this. So I worked kind of in an insurance-adjacent industry. One of the things with insurance is they're modeling the results of multiple losses in a year. Let me give you two simple examples, right? Let's imagine that you have just two losses, right? And each loss has a distribution, right? A distribution from maybe $0 up to maybe $1 million, and maybe the peak of the distribution is, you know, it's $500,000, right? And you have different losses with different distributions, and you want to combine them, right? So I gave this code a prompt, and I said, well, here are two losses I want you to combine. They're normally distributed, and this is the parameters for the normal distribution. Tell me what the combined result are. Now, so I hope everybody realizes these are random variables, and if you have two normally distributed random variables and you're adding them, the result is a normally distributed result with a mean, which is the sum of the means of the two losses, if you like, and then the variance is the sum of the variance, right? Now, I don't think everybody knew that, did you? No. Okay, that's fine. So I put the prompt in, and I asked it to generate the code, and it generated it correctly. I didn't tell it anything about random variables. I didn't tell it anything about the shortcut, but it figured it out. It figured out how to do this. It figured out that the mean of the combined mean was the sum of the means, and it figured out the combined variance is the sum of the variances. It knew to do that. And I can tell you that 6 months ago, I experimented with this and with the same problem, and it came up with utter junk. Now, in December, it's come up with actually a pretty good answer, and I looked at its answer, and I thought, this is exactly the kind of code that I would write to solve this problem. Right, it's got that good. So let me just run this. So the prompt that I gave it, will it start? Okay, yeah. So that's the initial distribution. That's the second distribution. I asked it for some good charts, and it's kind of given me okay charts, and there's the result, and this is correct. Right, now that took me about 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes to write the prompt, and then 3 minutes to generate the code and then run it. So I was able to get the correct answer in 10 minutes from a standing start. Imagine I gave the same problem to a data scientist. How long do you think it would take to get a result? Okay.
Mike, I have a question. So let's say we're in a situation where we know we have to solve the problem, but we don't know that mathematical relationship, and code generates that for us.
That's very bad.
What would we do?
That's very, very bad. You should never do this, right? So this is my point. One of the things I'm going to get onto later is you should never use this for problems where you don't already know the answer. It's a productivity tool. It's not good. I wouldn't trust it to tell me the definitive answer to problems I didn't already know the answer to, right? I would use it as a clue. It's giving me a hint, but you cannot trust it, right? You absolutely cannot trust it. That's one of the things I wanted to give you a warning about. Okay, so let's move on from this. The other piece I did is did a similar model, but this time using 2 beta distributions. And you can't use that shortcut about combining the means. You have to use convolution, and you have to use a grid, right? And I didn't tell that in its prompt, but it figured out that it couldn't do that. It figured out in this code. It's actually in here somewhere. I kind of got to move on a bit faster here. But it's figured out, it did the convolution, it did the grid, it did everything, figured out on basically a 2-paragraph prompt, right? So it did the whole thing, although this is a much harder problem and I'm going to run it. This is going to take a little while longer to show because it's actually using convolution, which is more numerically intensive, right? But it actually gave me the correct answer. And I didn't tell it random variables, and I didn't tell it convolution, but it figured it out. And 6 months ago, it gave me utter junk when I asked for this same thing. And now it's given me the correct answer. All right, so let's move on to an even harder problem, right? Let's move on from the statistics to code generation, or rather to machine learning. Okay, so how good is it at machine learning? If I gave it a data set, could it figure out how to do a machine learning model to figure out how to fit it? The answer is yes. So I told it to go and download the sklearn data set. There's a breast cancer data set in sklearn. Told it to download that, and I told it to go and create a machine learning model to fit it and to give me some results. Now imagine I gave that to you. How long would it take you to get some results? And the answer here is it took me 5 minutes to write the prompt, and it took me about 2 minutes to get to the solution. So basically, within 10 minutes, I have a functioning model. So let me show you. I'll just run it now. Okay, so the results, the chart, so it's taking a while to do the calculation because it's a logistic regression. It's not the best presentation, but it's all there. Confusion matrix, precision recall, receiver operating characteristics, classification metrics, blah, blah, blah. It's all there. 10 minutes. Okay, so you can do this. Okay, so you can go and generate the code. All right, so let me go back to the slides while I wrap up here. Well, it takes a second. Okay. Okay, so I had an example of soccer results, and I wanted the mean number of goals per match. And I had a big table of results. It's a fairly simple calculation. Mean goals are kind of home goals and away goals divided by the number of games per season and by league. It's not that difficult. It could not figure it out for the life of it. It could not. It just gave me utter rubbish, right? It could not figure out the column names. It could not figure out how to do that calculation. And generally speaking, it's really bad at data frame manipulation, really bad. And a couple of times it's given me code, and I've looked at it, and I thought, this is wrong, but it's subtly wrong, right? Which is the worst kind of wrong, right? So what I found out you have to do is to break it into steps. And in the end, if it's anything reasonably complicated, you just have to do it manually. And that's a general result. Data frame manipulation is not a strong point for CodeGen. Model.py, the model API for Django, really doesn't do very well on aggregations. Surprisingly, it does quite well on SQL code generation for reasons I've not quite figured out. But generally, any data manipulation of any complexity is really not good in code generation. You have to do it yourself, which poses some interesting problems, doesn't it? Code quality, Google-style function comments you've already seen, named keyword arguments, type hints, descriptive variable names. They're all in the code that I showed you today. It generates loads and loads of test cases for you. PEP8, just put the word PEP8 in, and it will make your code PEP8 compliant. It does have an issue with line lengths, though, for some reason I've never figured out. Comments are actually pretty damn good. And if you ask it to generate code documentation, it will do a very good job for you. So in my code, I've had to kind of override some of the comments a few times and add maybe 10 or 20 lines to a big, long file for a big project. It's not that much that you have to do, right? So months ago, I scored CodeGen for data science on a scorecard, right? Notice, by the way, this score. We'll come back to that in the questions maybe. And I scored it what I thought how good it was. And then I revisited this score the other day, preparing for this talk, and all of the scores have gone up, right? The code generation quality has gone up, and I think this is more than good enough for data science. Okay, so some implications for you guys and everything. I've got only 2 more slides now. Very active updates. You saw it pop up, right? Sometimes 2 times a day. Code quality getting better and better. There have been a number of requests, if you look at the Cursor chat, for notebooks. And I know that you guys love your notebooks, right? I've never been a fan, frankly. I know that makes me a minority of 1, right? But it's fine. The competition, IDEs, Google, anti-gravity, that's out. I showed you a slide. That's supposed to be quite good. Haven't tried it. Lovable online, an online editor. That's a thing out of Sweden that seems to have a ton of fans. People seem to love it. Windsurf, which was the original competitor, it's still going. Microsoft haven't entered the market, and neither has OpenAI come up with a proper IDE either, though there's rumors that it's coming. There is a startup offering a notebook AI. I've been told about these guys a number of times. In the last 6 months, it hasn't really seemed to have gone anywhere, right? So maybe they're struggling with funding, I don't know. Okay, implications. Better code gen, higher productivity, lower employment, right? It's not so great. Software engineers using Cursor, well, just think what they can do. I've shown you what it can do. Software engineers can start eating your lunch, right? There we go. I'm sure you'd love to hear that. So survival tactics, depth of knowledge, and I think as Eric said, you cannot trust this. This absolutely needs adult supervision, right? Code generation, absolutely it does. You have to know what the answer is, right? You cannot do this vibe coding thing of blindly accepting things. That's just disaster waiting to happen, right? Don't do it. And that means that you have to use CodeGen. So it's not enough to use these nice little toy things on the web. Go and get something like Cursor and try it out for yourself. And also, more controversially, I think data scientists need to expand into knowing JavaScript, Django, and the other things. That's a killer question. I'll let you read that, and then you can downgrade my presentation if you like. Okay, so this is me. Finding out more, I've blogged extensively about this, as you can see. This is me on LinkedIn, and this is my thing. I am available for work. Right now, I'm looking for employment. You can see I've got the CodeGen skills. So if you want somebody who's got CodeGen, please let me know. If you want a people manager that's almost a human being, then I'm probably a good choice. All right, so I'll stop there, and we'll take a few minutes of questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. We do have some time for questions. I'm going to go back here.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Quick question. Is it so much software engineers eating data scientists' lunch or the other way around?
That depends. That depends on you guys, right? So look, if you go off and you learn a little bit of JavaScript and you go off and learn Django and these other things, you can move yourself up the stack, right? That's quite possible. So it can work both ways. But if you decide that, no, you love your notebooks and you were going to ignore CodeGen, they're going to eat your lunch. So basically, it's dog eat dog, I'm afraid, in my view. So did that answer the question?
Yep, thanks.
Yeah.
A couple very short questions. What is you showed examples where you said it was good but not great.
Yeah.
Is it very good at going iteratively back and forth? So
Yes.
you get the first draft and you go into the prompt box and you say, hey, I need to improve these things.
Yes.
It does it very well.
Yeah, so the way that I prefer to do development, right, what I found is if you give it a very long prompt that's more than about 2 pages, it doesn't do very well. Okay, so what I do, if I got a more detailed project, what I'll do is I'll break it down. I think Eric kind of hinted at this earlier, right? You think about your structure of your code that you want, you give it one piece, and then you iteratively work on it, just adding functionality. So you break it down into chunks. And what I found is for code of any complexity, it's an iterative process. You prompt, you get something back, then you move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Okay, second quick question. Jupyter Notebooks are available or not available? So I wasn't clear from what you said.
So basically, nobody has a true AI-enabled notebook that I've seen. And when I say AI-enabled, it will do things like, where I put the comment in and it generated code.
Right.
I've not seen anything like that. I've also not seen stuff where there's a prompt on a notebook where you can go and generate code. that maybe people are working on that. I see some people saying that. Yeah, and I certainly hope they are, right? But I've not seen it as of today.
I think there is an expansion for Jupyter called Jupyter AI.
Right.
That's just that.
Yeah.
Final quick question. What does it use under the hood? Like what LLM does it use?
Oh, okay. So initially I thought, I fell in love with Claude. Claude, the LLM, not the person, right? But anyway, I fell in love with Claude, and I said, well, let's go and use Claude. And I set it to use Claude, and then there was an update, and it said it would just use an automatic choice, whichever it felt was better. And I thought, okay, let's try that, and it works for me. Right, so I think it will tend to choose the cheapest, right? Because I'm cheap and I'm only paying $20 a month, right? But it's fine. It works well enough for me, right? And I know that you can burn up the tokens, do a little bit more complex stuff, but I haven't felt the need to do that.
Sorry. Sorry. So Cursor and VS Code can run IPython files, and also there's a Marimo extension for Cursor. Like, have you experimented with CodeGen or running that in Cursor? And then I guess my other question is, like, Cursor also has plan mode. I'm curious if you've experimented with plan mode, and like, does it work well for data science or not?
So I haven't experimented with plan mode, and the other extension I haven't played around with at all. Right? I've just used Cursor straight out of the box, and frankly, it's worked for me. That's it.
So I have a theory that current LLMs at the moment are quite bad at reasoning about like data dependence. I've noticed it with like race conditions, and I think like your data frame. I've noticed the same thing with data frames. It's quite bad at that. I was curious if you had a theory as to this observation as well.
Partly. So one of the things, when I looked at this recently, I looked and I found that it wasn't very good at figuring out what the column names were, which is a bit dumb, really. I thought it could, but it didn't seem to know. So I don't know. I suspect it's to do with the way that it's trained, and I suspect that there are not that many great examples of complex data frame manipulation on Git or wherever it's trained from. That's a suspicion, right? If somebody told me I'm wrong, I would be more than happy to believe it, but that's just my suspicion. And generally what I found is that the further that you go from the well-beaten path or the well-known path, the worse the code generation is. So when I'm experimenting with the Bokeh JS libraries right now, there's not a lot on that. The code generation isn't great for that, right? And so the further you go from what everybody else has done, the kind of less good it is.
Thanks for the talk. So as a data science leader, do you see any danger that data visualization will essentially become obsolete? Because we're developing a natural language interface to data, so why do we even need visualizations if we can just ask questions about the data?
It's a very good question, right? Look, I used to work in Click, right? So I used to work in BI. I see that we're getting to the point at which somebody's going to put a good NLP front end, and then it'll just produce the visualizations. There are problems with that we can talk about. I can talk about that in great depth, right? But I think that this is basically the death knell for BI as a career choice, right? It's just a question of when rather than if. I think that the idea of people knowing the ins and outs of visualization APIs are probably gone, right? I know Bokeh very well, but I can't remember all the details, but it knows it, so why should I bother learning? And it also makes the switching costs easy. So on the Streamlit thing, I couldn't get Bokeh working with it, so I just said, go and use Altair instead, and it did. And I don't care, right? So there's some of this, I think it's going to make visualization easier, but the usual things with these things is it raises the bar, right, and the skill set, right? So the productivity demand is going to increase as well, which has implications for everybody. But I think we're only just seeing the implications of what this technology will do. I think it's really going to harm BI people. And I'm sorry if you're a BI person, but sorry.
Thank you for the talk. I'm from academia. I teach Python, analytics, and also BI. So from a teaching point of view, how do you recommend, how do we teach the next generation? So as Eric said, and a few other people have said here, and I agree, look, the training for Cursor is dreadful, right? I mean, you're just going to have to create something yourself. And that's probably, you know, in a couple of years, won't be a problem. Everything will have caught up, but you can't wait a couple of years. So I think really the thing to do here is train people on it with hands-on exercises to figure out where it works and where it doesn't, and just give them exercise after exercise and ask them to think about what's good and what isn't,
right? This is how I learned, and I learned by going to talks here in this building, right? AI tinkerers and others, and I saw what people had done, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that. So I kind of looked at what they'd done. If you look at the AI tinkerers, I'm going to get the shepherd's crook to hook me off the stage in a second. But if you have a look at AI tinkerers and you start to analyze their code, you get a sense of what's possible, right? So I'm afraid it's just very difficult, right? The problem is that any course that you write now will probably have to be substantially revised in 6 months. And I think that's just the nature of the way that we are.
Thank you so much, Mike. One more round of applause.
Cheers.